Hey friends, so it has been a year since I have done a video featuring my tips for Patreon, and I thought that it was worth revisiting. Drex here from DrexFactor.com, and having had both successes and failures with Patreon in 2018, I would love to give you guys my best tips for using Patreon in 2019. Please join my notification squad by clicking on the subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you know exactly when I come out with a new video. And before we dive in, I just want to send a shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Darkmonk, Flowtoys, LMF Props, Spinballs, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can visit them all by following the links down in the description of this video. So the last time I talked about Patreon, I was doing relatively well, at least for a flow artist on the platform. I had a decent number of supporters given the size of my channel, and a few $100s worth of income every month. Well, since then I've actually grown by quite a bit. I now have more than 100 supporters on Patreon, and I'm bringing in more than $1,000 a month on the platform. Not bad, right? So I wanted to drill down for you guys exactly how I got there, as well as what my best tips are for those of you who are just starting out on the platform. Tip number 1. Figure out your reward structure. Now, without a doubt, I think this was the single most important thing that I learned in 2018. See, I was kind of stuck in this mode of thinking that I see a lot of other Patreon channels in, where I was thinking it's one reward per tier, right? And that way, you wind up either with almost no tiers or with a whole bunch of them, and they get kind of confusing. And I took some great inspiration from another YouTuber by the name of Aaron Rutan. Aaron actually offers multiple rewards per support tier on his Patreon, and what I realized as a result of looking through them was he's actually creating something that in the entrepreneurial world they call a value ladder. So let's say for the sake of argument that you're really into Aaron's videos because you happen to like his approach to creating art and everything, and his style may not exactly be your particular cup of tea, but you really love the techniques that he uses behind it. Okay, so maybe you don't want his online courses then, but what about all of the custom brushes that he creates for doing his digital artwork? Well, that's an interesting idea. And if you like his brushes, maybe you want to revisit that later and perhaps look into some of his behind-the-scenes content to really understand how he applies those concepts. Cool, so basically you've got somebody with a particular level of interest in the content that you're creating, and you've offered them kind of an entry point into how they can get more out of your content, and then giving them a next step along the way, too. So I applied this same philosophy to my own reward structure, and what I discovered was, unlike a lot of other Patreon channels, mine actually has the most supporters in the middle tiers rather than the bottom ones. Which is really cool, and it means that my average supporter is actually contributing more than most other Patreon channels that I've seen. So I'll link to Aaron down in the description there, as well as the video that he made on this topic that really inspired me. And I'll also link to my own Patreon down there so you can see how I've applied this idea myself. Tip number 2, listen to your supporters. So this should really go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Part of what you're getting out of Patreon is a direct relationship with the people who are supporting you. These are people that have a vested interest in your content beyond the scope of just your normal audience members. These are people that love your content so much that they want to give you money to make sure that it keeps on coming. So you should really be looking at Patreon not only as an opportunity to make money off of your channel, but to learn what it is that people love about your content and what they want to see more of. In 2018, I did as much as I could to start conversations on my Patreon. I wanted to hear from people. I wanted them to tell me what they liked and what they didn't like. I wanted to hear them tell me what ideas stuck with them, what videos they thought were cool, and of course, to give me ideas for other stuff that I could do. I also, for the first time, started tracking information on my new patrons. That is, I would send them a little feedback form where I would find out what platform they'd heard of me originally on, and if there was any particular reward tier that inspired them to start donating, as well as if they could pick my brain for an hour, what would they want to learn. And this has been fantastic because it's telling me what platforms are best at bringing people to my Patreon, as well as what the things are that inspire people. So take your Patreon as a major opportunity to start these conversations, to make your content more interactive. After all, that's part of the reason why people are supporting you, is that they love what you're doing so much that they want to get more of it. Give them the opportunity. Tip number 3, and this is without a doubt the single most important thing that I tell people that are interested in starting their own Patreons. Process. You see, I've lost count of the number of people that I've seen start up Patreon channels that either don't have a clear idea of what it is they're actually delivering, or even worse, they don't have a clear process in place for how they're going to deliver something regularly. Now, why is this a problem? Well, because if people are signing up to give you money every time you create a new piece of content or every month, then all of a sudden there's a financial pressure on you that there wasn't before to get the work done. And some people thrive under that. Some people thrive under the pressure of saying, oh goodness, I owe these people something, I need to put something together and everything. Whereas there's a lot of other people for whom that's really intimidating, and it actually creates a major problem for them in getting things done. A lot of people will ask me how soon they can offer a Patreon when they start producing content. And to be honest with you, I really think that you ought to put out like probably 50 pieces of content before you get there. And I know that that seems like an intimidatingly high number, but bear in mind, once you get to 50 pieces of content, you've got a process in place for how you're producing that content. You've got an idea of how you're going to do it on the regular. And yes, that means that you are producing content for free for a while. And that's not a bad thing, because it'll help you build an audience. And when you've got that audience, it'll be that much easier to convert them over into being supporters. But without that process in place, you're going through the torturous process of creating content, and now you have a social contract with all these people that are giving you money every month. And I've seen more than a few people for whom that pressure is just overwhelming. So yeah, my big #1 tip for anybody wanting to start a Patreon in 2019, get your process figured out first. Once you're there, everything else, by comparison, is going to be a lot easier. So I hope these 3 tips helped you guys out. And if you'd like some additional help in setting up your Patreon, I actually have a handy-dandy guide that you can download that covers everything from the mechanics of how to set up your Patreon and the reward tiers and everything to how you get the word out there. You can download that either at the link down in the description or up in the cards here on YouTube. And of course, before I turn you guys loose, I want to put out a massive thank you to my awesome supporters on Patreon, because without them, this video nor any of the other videos on my channel would exist. And if you guys are interested in supporting the work that I do on Patreon, please head on over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and sign up, and thank you in advance. So are any of you other guys out there on Patreon as well? What are your best tips? What do you think are the most important things for newbies to know before starting up their own Patreon channels? Let me know down in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you again next time. And also, let me know what you're struggling with on Patreon, and who knows, maybe I'll have a tip that'll help you out.